what are your thoughts on the Bears' offensive tackle position right now? Like, what's on the roster? How do you feel about it?
Yeah, so it's definitely an interesting conversation when it comes to the Bears at offensive tackle because you got Braxton Jones, you have Darnell Wright, who was a top 10 pick just last year. So obviously those guys, Darnell Wright's not going anywhere, but there are people who have different opinions on Braxton Jones. I'd argue that it's one of the few positions where there's like some debate on if it's a need or not. It's like quarterback and offensive tackle. There's some debate there depending on how you feel about Braxton Jones. So to me, I like Braxton Jones. I thought he showed enough last year in his only his second year that I think the arrow is trending upwards. So to me, I don't think you absolutely need to spend the ninth overall pick, let's say, on a tackle or even a trade back in the first round to get a tackle. But at the same time, this is such a good offensive tackle class that I wouldn't necessarily rule it out because while I like Braxton Jones, and I think he's a starting quality offensive tackle in the NFL, some of these guys that we're going to talk about could potentially be top 5 offensive tackles in the NFL or top 3 offensive tackles in the NFL if they progress like we think they can. So it's like, do we want to upgrade slightly in the short term with the potential to get a very valuable piece long term, or do we try to address other needs and maybe just draft an offensive tackle later on in the draft? So it's definitely interesting. I'm kind of the opinion that I think the Bears should go in a different direction in the first round, but still use a draft pick on an offensive tackle.
I feel really similar about Braxton Jones there. Like he has one of the best values in the NFL right now on his contract. Like there are not many players producing more for less money than Braxton Jones.
Good point.
And there is value to that. And that has to be a consideration here. But man, there was a stretch so after he got back from injury, I thought he was looking pretty darn good. And then there was like a 3-game stretch. I want to say it was like weeks 15, 16, 17, where I was like really getting worried about him. So it was like, it felt like he was regressing. He wasn't the same player that he was earlier in the year or the year before. And the last 2 weeks of the season, he did look a lot better after that. But there was a point in my mind where I was starting to just teeter on the idea of like, man, is Braxton good enough? Because I'd been on the train that he was for like a year and a half at this point. But hopefully those last 2 games were more of what we're really going to see going forward. And I feel like there's enough evidence there that I'm comfortable with just going with that. But personally, I wouldn't mind a better swing than Borum behind him, just in case.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think Borum might not even be on the roster. Come when it's all said and done. I think there's definitely a need for a swing tackle, and there, like I said, this draft class is so deep at offensive tackle. Like you can get a really good offensive tackle at 75, pick 75 or something like that. And he can start as a swing tackle, and it's insurance in case Braxton Jones does regress a little bit. You have an option to replace him, something like that.
There's a guy I have in mind that I watched today that we'll get to later. But
yeah.
And speaking of Larry Borum, actually, so as long as we mention him, I feel like Larry Borum has to be one of the better locker room guys and harder working guys on the roster because he didn't fit what they wanted when they came here, when the regime came in. And you can't kill him. You can't get rid of him because he adapts, he evolves, he works his ass off to be at whatever he needs to be, which is just an interesting aspect. I do think that he's a little lacking there. Like I think he's an average swing at best, but I do think he is hard to get rid of.
Yeah, I mean, as a swing tackle, you could probably do worse. I mean, each team has 2 offensive tackles, and there aren't 64 really good offensive tackles in the world. So there's, your swing tackle is going to be, a guy who has some issues. Otherwise, he'd be a starter. So, and I think Larry Borum has some issues like athletically. He's not a great athlete, and he has just technique wise. But hey, for a third offensive tackle, you could do a lot better. But you could also do a lot worse.
What type of draft capital do you think we're looking at? I think you said a minute ago, like a 4th rounder is kind of what you're thinking, maybe 3rd rounder.
Yeah, I kind of got ahead of myself a little bit there, but like I still wouldn't rule out a 1st rounder, because if they have a high enough grade on a guy where they think this guy could be a top 3 tackle in the NFL, like that's so valuable. And when you have a rookie quarterback most likely coming in, like that could be really important. But yeah,
Trade.
70,
I
yeah,
was just
yeah,
say
like a
trade
70.
down to like 17, 18, and JC Latham sitting there on the board staring at you. Like,
Yeah, absolutely. Because then I mean, you get those other picks where you can address maybe more other positions that are bigger need right away. So yeah, that would be perfect. But it, ideally, I would say you're looking at like at pick 75 is what they have. Like that's where you would start maybe looking at the offensive tackles. Maybe if they have a second round pick, from a Fields trade or trading down from pick 9, maybe you could talk yourself into it there, especially if a guy has versatility to play inside and out. But also just like a day 3 pick, I think would be perfect. Like on a guy who's going to be a swing tackle right away. Maybe he never becomes anything more than a swing tackle, but he's good depth, and can kind of come in and not kill you to pitch. And you hope you hit another home run like you did with Braxton Jones on day 3, when no one really expected him to come in and start definitely not start right away, let
right.
alone. But he did. So maybe you strike gold a little bit on day 3. So somewhere in that day round 3, around 4, around 5 range, I think is a good spot for them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that I agree with most of that. It's like it could be anywhere from day one all through the rest of the draft. It's kind of
Yeah.
a offensive tackle is when you find it, you take it at the right
Yep.
value, and they're not in a good enough spot at the position that I feel like you don't take the value picks when they line
Yeah.
up right for you.
And
Now,
Poles has been a former offensive lineman. Like he's said so many times that they have to build up that offensive line. Like it would not surprise me at all to see multiple picks on the offensive line.
speaking of Ryan Poles, what do you think he's looking for in his offensive lineman for this system, for this scheme that the Bears are going to run under Shane Waldron?
Yeah, so I mean that's difficult to tell because I'm not sure we 100% know what kind of scheme Shane Waldron's in. I think there's too many questions on where he came from the Seahawks, like how much influence did Pete Carroll have on what they wanted to do offensively? I think we have a decent idea, outside zone scheme, stuff like that. So you're looking for an athletic offensive lineman. I think if we're looking just on based on polls, we could just see kind of the offensive lineman that he's drafted in his couple years as GM, like Darnell Wright was bigger than probably what is normally fit in like an outside zone scheme, but super athletic, tested really well at the combine. Braxton Jones was super long and athletic. Even the guys they drafted on day 3 in his first draft, those interior guys were all really long and athletic, with the exception of like Doug Kramer, but the other guys were really long and athletic. So I think that's what you're looking for. I think they
Well, even
value length.
Kramer was really athletic. He's just
Well,
has
yeah,
T-Rex
he was.
arms.
Yes, he was athletic by T-Rex arms, but that was also like what a 6th round pick. So you
Yeah,
overlook some things when you're that late. But yeah, I think length and athleticism are the 2 things that they're going to value. So I think Darnell Wright actually has like the shortest arms of any offensive lineman that they drafted, and he was still over 33 like and a half inches or something like
yeah.
that.
He
So
he was just over that 33 threshold, but it was like
okay,
his
that's what it was.
athleticism makes up for it.
Is yeah, everything else kind of made up for it. But I do think just in a vacuum, if you're looking, it's length and athleticism. So those RAS scores for those offensive linemen, we don't have them yet, but we should pay attention to them once they do come out.
Yeah, just 2 weeks away from the NFL Combine.
So close.
Get excited.